Hey guys, it's Dee. Welcome back to Delving into the Cold. I want to go ahead and apologize. I know that I didn't get a video up for the Boy in the Box case last week, and it's not for lack of trying, believe you me. My computer is just not working so good. I'm trying to save up money to get a new one, but alas, I have not done that yet. So I am trying, I promise. I am working very hard on getting everything to work out well, and hopefully we'll get there. So without any further ado, we're going to start our case for today, which is the case of the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. And first of all, you hear the name Jimmy Hoffa and you automatically think mob connections and disappeared, nobody found him, he's buried under Giant Stadium, he's dumped in a lake or an ocean somewhere wearing, concrete shoes, whatever. And actually my friend and I were talking about this last night, and we were saying, it's pretty, she was like, it's pretty obvious that the mob had something to do with it. And while I cannot disagree with that, there are other theories out there that are definitely worth checking out and going over. So let's talk a little bit about what brought Jimmy so much fame before his disappearance, because I don't think a lot of people talk about that. Jimmy was the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, which is America's largest labor union. And he went to jail for 4 years for charges of, among other things, jury tampering, mail fraud, and bribery, while, being president of the Teamsters. And he was actually pardoned by Richard Nixon in 1971. So that's kind of why he was a household name to begin with, but probably why most people know him now is because of what happened on July 30th, 1975. On this particular day, Jimmy was at, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but I'll try to say it correctly, Macca's Red Fox restaurant in Michigan, and he disappeared from there. Nobody's seen him since. So he's just kind of up and vanished, to be 100% honest with you. And the case mostly centers on Oakland County, Michigan. And so that's where most of this is going to focus on. And again, most of the theories are going to apply to mob connections. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And I'm sure you've heard the crazy theories out there that make people sound crazy and insane for believing the conspiracy theories. But this is an actual case that happened. This isn't, something out of this world. This is something that, no, we have proof that, this guy's not here anymore. So 2 weeks before Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, the federal government discovered hundreds of millions of dollars had disappeared from the Teamsters pension fund. And, y'all, that's a lot of money. And so, obviously, that looks suspicious. But, it was never resolved because, again, 2 weeks later, Jimmy disappeared. So, the FBI actually originally suspected Tony Jack Giacalone and Tony Provenzano of taking, Jimmy. Of them being the ones that, quote-unquote, got rid of him. Because they were supposed to meet with him on the day of his disappearance. And, a lot of cases that you hear about, such as, maybe D.B. Cooper, or things of that nature, are still talked about a lot by civilians, but the federal government's pretty much given up on them. And this is not true in the Jimmy Hoffa case. In Jimmy's case, as recently as 2013, the federal government has been doing excavations of land trying to find out what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. In 2006, they dug up a horse farm. They didn't find him, but, they looked. 2013, they dug up some land. They didn't find him. But it's a case that's still very much piquing the interest of not only the federal government, but local law enforcement, and, obviously, people like us, the armchair detectives. And so let's get into some of the theories. Now, the first theory comes from a criminology professor from Northern Arizona University by the name of Buccellato. And he theorizes that Hoffa was murdered in a home in Bloomfield Hills, which, if you look at a map, Bloomfield Hills is very close to the restaurant that Jimmy was at when he disappeared. And so, already right there, that's a pretty strong bit of evidence. But he believes that the mob bosses lured him to a parking lot here, and that from there, they, restrained him and took him to the home in Bloomfield Hills and murdered him. Now, the biggest part of this theory that gives credence for me is the fact that Buccellato then believes that they immediately took him after murdering him to a crematorium and cremated him, or to a sausage factory, and, kind of quote unquote disposed of the remains. And that would explain a lot about why his body has never been found. And it kind of makes sense geographically wise that it was so close to where he had been. So to me, it's a pretty solid theory. It sounds like a good one to me. And so this was actually a theory that was developed in 2017. So again, this is a theory that's new and relevant. And then we have another theory. And again, I'm not going to get into all the theories, because if I did, we'd be here all day, and ain't nobody got time for that. But nonetheless, I will get into this other theory, which to me piqued my interest. And this theory comes from Tony Z. Zerilli, who is a former mob underboss for the Detroit mob. And he claims that Hoffa was buried on a farm in Oakland Township. And if you look at the deeds to this land, this piece of land in particular that he's talking about was at one point owned by Giacomo Tocco, who they refer to as Blackjack. Now, Blackjack happens to be Tony Z's cousin. So again, this is kind of like a pretty solid fact, since since Tony Z and Blackjack were related. But Tony Z claims that on the night that he went missing, 3 mobsters bound and gagged Jimmy and took him to the barn on this plot of land in Oakland Township. And while he was there, they hit him over the head with a shovel. Now, that didn't take Jimmy out like they expected, so there's a bit of a scuffle, but eventually they were able to, incapacitate him enough to get him into a hole that had already been buried in the floor of the barn there, bury him alive, and then later come back and put a concrete slab over him so that no one would find him. And so this, again, doesn't sound that far-fetched. I mean, it's not, like little green sprites came out of the ground and took him off. It's actually, it's a theory that to me could be a solid one. And he even went as far as to state, no, he wasn't stabbed, no, he wasn't shot, he was buried alive. He was alive when they put him in the hole, and they covered him with dirt and they left him there. And so that's pretty specific. And I'm not saying he's not lying, because it's, it's definitely a possibility, but it's pretty sturdy theory. And so the problem with this, however, is in 2013, when Tony Z was talking to the FBI about this, they eventually went out to this property in Oakland Township and they excavated it. They didn't find Jimmy, obviously. But the problem with that for me is Tony Z was 85 years old when he reported this to the FBI. He could have been confused as to the location, or it could have been the simple fact that Jimmy was moved later. Because the property changed hands between 1975 and 2013. So to me, again, this is a pretty obvious, pretty sound theory. It's definitely something that I think, regardless of the fact that they didn't find him there, I think that it's a good theory. I will say, however, that there's been numerous excavations in Michigan, and there were originally 5 main suspects in this case, and all of them are dead. So, likely we will never know unless someone just accidentally stumbles over his body. And it's sad, but I mean, that's the facts of life, unfortunately. So that's pretty much all I have, because there's not a lot of evidence on this case. He kind of just vanished into thin air, and so we don't know, to be completely honest with you. But I'd love to hear you guys, your theories. You can comment on this. I will try to get a video of this up. Make no promises. You can always email me, or you can go to the webpage, or however you want to communicate. Let's keep it civil though, guys. Let's be nice to each other, because all theories are valid. Alright guys, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, it's Dee. Welcome back to Delving into the Cold.